The Panzer 38T, which was actually not a German design, was a big part of the Panzer army in the first years of the war. Though it quickly became obsolete as the newer and better tanks were introduced, it is well worth a look. So without further ado, let's start with its origins and development. The origins of this vehicle go back to the mid-1930s, when a Czech company, CKD, developed a new light tank called the TNH. It was a fairly modern design for the time, with leaf spring suspension, riveted armor, and a 37mm gun. But at that time the Czech army was not interested in the design, so the company offered this tank to other countries, and it wouldn't take long to find customers. They sold several units to Iran, Peru, and Switzerland in different configurations. The company's luck turned at home in 1937, when the Czech Ministry of Defense announced new requirements for a light tank. And at the same time the army had serious problems with the formerly ordered Skoda LTVZ-35 tanks. The designers quickly set to work at CKD, and on the base of the TNH they designed a new tank, which kept the main features of the former design, but improved on them in many ways. This new tank, called the TNH-S, used a new, more powerful 125 horsepower engine and featured 25mm of armor, better optics, and a redesigned crew compartment. The new tank's trials started in January 1938, where it was compared to the Skoda design, which was basically an export version of their former LTVZ-35 tank. During the trials, the CKD design proved to be much better balanced and more reliable. Several modifications were made during the trial period to the turret, hatches, and periscopes, but overall the army was impressed. By July the same year the tank was basically in its final shape, and not long after it was accepted to service as LTVZ-38, Light Tank Model 38. The army was negotiating on the price with CKD because they thought it was a bit too high, but eventually, thanks to the growing tensions between Germany and Czechoslovakia, the contract was signed at the end of July, and the first units were planned to roll out at the end of 1938. But after the Munich agreements, the work slowed down. At that time CKD offered this new tank again to other countries, and interestingly, the British wanted to test the vehicle as well. So in February 1939, a tank was shipped to England for trials. After the tests, however, the British were not impressed. They found the interior too cramped and thought the vehicle's mobility is lacking. By the time this vehicle returned home, the country was under German occupation. After the German forces occupied the country in March 1939, it didn't take long until the cooperation between CKD and the German Arms Department started. The company under German control was renamed BMM. A German commission was set out to study the Czech industry, and when they were presented the LTVZ-38, they were very impressed. The tank from CKD was much better than the German light tanks of the time, the Panzer I and II. It featured better armament, armor, and mobility, and it only weighed about a ton more, and its cost was about the same. The Germans decided to adopt the tank very quickly, as it was considered a very good design for the time. First it was simply called Czech Panzer III. This shows what the Germans compared this tank to. Then it was renamed Panzerkampfwagen 3.7cm LTM-38, where the LTM stands for Light Tank Model 38. Then a bit later, in early 1940, was officially named Panzerkampfwagen 38T, where the T stands for Czechish, as Czech. The main change the Germans implemented on the tank was the addition of a fourth crew member for exchange of somewhat reduced ammo capacity. Originally the commander was the gunner and the loader as well, while in the German use, the commander operated the gun, next to him sat the loader. The original Panzer 38T featured 12 to 55mm thick armor on the front of the hull and 15mm on the sides. The turret was similarly armored, with 25mm thickness on the front and 15mm on the side and the rear. After the first combat experiences, it was clear the armor protection of the tank is not enough, so first they received additional 25mm armor plates on the front, then on the last G version, a more serious armor upgrade, basically doubling the protection of the tank. On this version, the frontal armor of the hull was increased to 30 to 50mm thickness, and the sides of the hull to 30mm. The turret was upgraded in a similar manner, with 50mm armor on the front and 30mm on the sides and the rear. The main armament was the Skoda 37mm gun. The secondary armament consisted of two 7.92mm machine guns. The tank was powered by the Praga 6-cylinder petrol engine, producing 125 horsepower. With this engine, the vehicle could reach a maximum speed of 56 km an hour and had a range of 200 km. Because the Panzer 38T design was basically unchanged during its lifetime, it's very hard to tell the different variants apart. But the most obvious giveaway of the later up-armored versions is the flat frontal armor plate introduced with the E models, while the early versions had a step in it in front of the radio operator's seat, similarly to the early Panzer IV designs. The tank's main variants were the original LTVZ 38, which is the Czechoslovak designation, the Panzerkampfwagen 38T A to D, the original tank in German use with minor modifications, E to F versions. These featured additional 25mm frontal armor, G version. This was the final variant with increased armor thickness all around, and the Panzerkampfwagen 38T NA, which was a planned modification with welded armor and upgraded turret, but it didn't go to production. If you want to know more about German tanks like the Panzer III and IV or other interesting Axis tanks, I already made videos on the German ones and have a separate video on Hungarian tanks in World War II as well. Though the Panzer 38T didn't have a very long service life, its reliable chassis was still used to build several other vehicles, even after the tank itself was deemed too weak for the front line. The Marder III was a lightly armored tank destroyer featuring the 75mm Pak 40 gun. The Grille, or by its official name, the 15cm SLG-33 of Panzerkampfwagen 38T, was a self-propelled artillery gun built on the 38T chassis carrying a 150mm infantry gun. The Flakpanzer 38T was a self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle featuring a 20mm cannon. A light reconnaissance vehicle built on the 38T chassis was the SD KFZ-140/1. Maybe the most well-known 38T variant is the Jagdpanzer 38, better known as Hetzer, which was an armored tank destroyer carrying the 75mm Pak 39 gun. The Panzer 38T saw action in the invasion of Poland, where 57 of them participated. Their performance was quite good, they didn't have any mechanical problems, and only 7 were knocked out during the campaign. But as with most early war German tanks, their armor was not thick enough to withstand anti-tank gunfire. Their armament, on the other hand, was much better than the Panzer I and II models, which were the most numerous in the German army at the time. By 1940, when the Battle of France began, their numbers were much higher, some 230 were ready for the attack. During the fighting in the West, it became clear, similarly to the Panzer III and IV models, that the armament on the German tanks is inadequate against the well-armored targets, like the bigger French tanks or the British Matildas. But better strategy on the German side helped them overcome that with the use of air support and artillery. In 1941, they participated in Operation Barbarossa, the attack on the Soviet Union. By that time, their numbers grew to almost 650 units in 5 panzer divisions. Like most German equipment, at first they were successful, but when they met with the newer Soviet tanks, the T-34 and the KV-1, their shortcomings quickly became clear. The Panzer 38T's armament was too weak against the new Soviet tanks, and its armor was vulnerable to their 76mm cannons at greater ranges. They were retired as frontline tanks in 1942, only 3 years after the Germans found it a great tank and accepted it to service. This just shows us how quick tank development was during the war. Some of them were used for training after that, but many of the tanks had their turrets removed and used on bunkers. Though the service of the Panzer 38T ended after only 3 years, the other vehicles based on its chassis were in use until the end of World War II, and this little tank is an interesting vehicle to remember. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.